I welcome you all in the name of the Most High and the sacred ancestors. Peace and blessings to you all. Ma'at Hotep, Alafia, Hujambo, Njarama, Tupe Seke, Kushe, Buwa, Isama. I appreciate your time. I appreciate your energy. Let us begin by giving reverence and honor. Dua to the Most High from whom we emanate. Dua to the sacred ancestors who bequeathed us our human experience. Mustn't forget that. Dua to all my African families who care to listen. May we all be blessed. May we all be elevated and resuscitated to our African reality by today's most powerful and pertinent lecture. And I preface with a caveat that we will be going into the twilight zone today, so please prepare your minds, ensure that you are here psychologically and spiritually, and I encourage you to take notes. Take notes and do some research when you go home to confirm that what you've heard today, to confirm or corroborate whether it's the truth. Ashe, and that will help you in your spiritual journey. Ashe, I exhort you to fasten your seatbelts and buckle up, for today's journey will be real bumpy. Dearly beloved, every day we open our eyes and take a breath. Let us not take that for granted and give thanks and praise to the Most High for that opportunity. Let us honor and reverence the sacred ancestors who made it possible for us to be here today, their lives, their deeds, their legacies, their contributions, their sacrifices. And let me impress upon all of us that it is because of them that we are here. So let us always honor and pay homage and respect to our dearly beloved ancestors and be reminded that we are our ancestors in the present. And when we honor our ancestors, when we remember ancestors, we honor ourselves. When we respect ourselves, we reverence our ancestors. When we express gratitude to our ancestors, they not only stand by us, they walk with us. And they make us lie down in green pastures. They restore our blessed souls, and they lead us beside the still waters. They will guide us towards the path of righteousness. They will comfort us as we walk through the valleys of the shadow of death. They will prepare a table before us even in the presence of our enemies, and they will most certainly anoint our heads with oil, and their legacies will follow us through the cycle of life. Let us be reminded that it is high treason to dishonor or to forget our ancestors. It is to devalue ourselves. It is to deviate from our destiny, to walk on burning coals, to become volunteer slaves to other social groups, namely the Europeans, the Arabs, and the Chinese. And I know with all my heart that one of the main reasons that we as Africans are in dire straits, on the precipice of disaster, is because of our ingratitude to our sacred ancestors, because of our treachery against our ancestors. And I must remind us that if we are to be liberated, we must set about repairing the broken umbilical cord to our ancestors, that we may dance again in the sun. May we all be blessed by today's message. Yes, I know it is a bitter pill. It is an earth-shattering but most pertinent message. And I know that will distress, that will perturb, and that will cause anxiety to the vast majority of us. But I must remind you again that truth is very painful surgery. And we as a people are in spiritual intensive care unit. Mustn't forget that. Therefore, it is critical that we dislodge some of the misinformation and downright lies that have been implanted deep down our psyche. I also know that today's message will continue the process of memory restoration. I know that today's message will continue to repair the broken umbilical cord between us and our dearly beloved ancestors. Today's message is a Sankofa message, Sankofa meaning retrieve, a message instructing us to go back to retrieve our history. And we must remember that history is instructive. Not only to go and retrieve our history, but to retrieve our legacies, our customs, our values, and our heritage, bequeathed by our sacred ancestors. A message that puts us on the path of reclaiming our African minds that we have long lost. A message that reawakens our African spirit, which has been suppressed by our Christianization and Islamization. A message that will restore our African confidence, our African self-esteem, and nationhood spirit. A message that will restore our African values and puts us back on the shoulders of our ancestors, put us back on the pathways and bridges built by ancestors. And I must tell you that I live with my ancestors, both post-colonial and pre-colonial, and I thank them daily for the blessings that they continually bestow. And I must remind you that teaching is the fulfillment of one of my ancestral obligations. I am obligated to teach. I am responsible to my ancestors, and I took an oath with my ancestors to avenge their spirits, to remind my people of the Ma'afa. That is the greatest Holocaust in the history of humanity suffered by my people at the hands of Arabs and Europeans. And it is my remit to proclaim from the rooftops the imperative of reclaiming our African minds. I acknowledge my ancestors for giving me life, for connecting me to the Almighty, the Most High, the universal life force, infinite source energy, for being my collective consciousness, and for the spirituality which I think Ashe. I'm so glad about today's lecture. It's long overdue, a most pertinent subject, powerful lecture, titled Ankh or Perish. And it's important to recognize that symbols provide the highest nutrition to the brain. You know, symbols are not just superficial. Our brain learns through images. The most powerful learning modality is imagery. We are visual creatures. And let me just say this before going any further, that no self-respecting conscious African rejects or denigrates their African symbols, none. And that only African phenotypes animated by European or Arabian spirits or devastated with European and Arabian psychology will express such PhD levels of self-hate, self-devaluation, and low self-esteem. And once again, in honor and respect to my beloved ancestors, I am compelled to deal with another of our psychopathology as African people. Our chronic anti-Africanism, expressed in the outright rejection and denigration of our spiritual and cultural symbols. I am talking about the Ankh. That it is an indictment to our humanity that most of us as Africans to this day are oblivious to the Ankh symbol. Absolute bunkers. Now let me ask you a question. Can you imagine a European being oblivious to their Christian cross? No. Can you imagine an Arab Muslim oblivious to the meaning of their half-crescent moon? No. Therefore, I maintain that it is sacrilegious for us as Africans to be ignorant of our spiritual and cultural symbols and to run away from our value systems like death. And I maintain that the anti-African symbols that we adopt and embrace and wrap around our necks and all other parts of our bodies often cause us the most injury. And let me start the lecture by giving you a brief overview of what the Ankh is. The Ankh is a word in the ancient African language, the oldest in the world to date, known as the Medu-Neter, which translates to divine speech or wisdom speech or ancestral wisdom. Now, of course, it was this language that the Greeks referred to as the hieroglyphs. And on the surface, Ankh literally means honoring eternal life, and that is through the union of the feminine and the masculine energy and principles, cosmologically, ecologically, biologically, and every other Lee that you can think on. In other words, the union of universal principles to bring about life. The union of humanity, i.e. the feminine and the masculine principle to continue the cycle of life. Honoring the divine feminine principle which our ancestors personified as Nut, which is the sky or the heaven, and honoring the divine masculine principle, which is personified as Geb, which translates to the earth, and honoring the fruits of that union, personified as Shu. Shu means the atmosphere or the air, that's a masculine principle, and Shu's complement, which is Tefnut, which is the feminine principle, which is moisture. And notice, our ancestors understood and overstood that the universe functions on two principles, two energies, feminine and masculine. And without those two energies coming into union, there is no life. So therefore, the Ankh is a divine key. It is a key to elevate your consciousness, to bring you back to your value system, which is what you are and who you are. And what is interesting to note is how we have been programmed to be spooked and terrified by our African symbols, to reject our African symbols and associate our symbols with vile negative connotations. We are a people that have been programmed to embrace symbols that manipulate our consciousness and keep us retarded and backwards, keep us in spiritual, psychological, and economic poverty rather than liberating our minds. We embrace religious symbols that represent death, economic symbols that reduce us to flunkies. Sad, sad commentary. The Ankh represents unity. Unity of what? The feminine and the masculine energies coming together. Now, here is a question. Who are the most disunited people in the world? I will answer for you. Africans. And the fact that we reject the Ankh is expression of our chronic implanted disunity. We are naturally disunited. We have been conditioned to be disunited. So then how can we appreciate the Ankh, which stands for unity in a cosmological sense, in an axiological sense, which is our value system, okay, in a cosmological sense, which is to do with the cosmic principles. In other words, the beginning, i.e., think about what the beginning is. The union of the feminine and the masculine principle. That's how things begin. That's how life begins. And we must understand that our African symbols are one of the pillars of our identity. And sadly, no other people in the world disidentify themselves from who they are more than Africans. Isn't that sad? And I must confess that today's message is one that galls me, because it exposes our debilitating psychopathology engineered by thousands of years of invasion and conquering by Europeans and Arabs. And that has devastated us with a multitude of issues. Identity crisis, self-hate, self-abnegation, inferiority complex, self-devaluation, and the high treason we perpetuate against our ancestors. And on top of that, the false dichotomies that we perpetuate. That the average African today believes that to embrace their African culture actually equals to embracing Stone Ageism or backwardness or rejection or unsophisticatedness. Madness. And listen, I will be going in on us hard today purely because of our desperately deteriorating condition. And I maintain that it is no longer light that is needed in our souls, but fire to cleanse us, to sanitize us. It is no longer gentle shower that is needed, but thunder and lightning and storm and earthquake to wake us up from our deep sleep. And I shall direct you back into the book of Ani, which you will find in the Pertem Heru, the book of coming forth by day. I shall direct you to a text there, a most powerful text that speaks about our topic today. And it says, whoever hungers, listen keenly, let them be satisfied where? In the house of their ancestors. You can only be satisfied. You can only be protected in the house of those who have built the bridges on which you walk. Those who have built the roads on which you step. Whoever hungers, I don't care what you hunger for. The only people that can satisfy you are those that brought you here in the first place. So you have no business, looking up to the Arabs or the Europeans to get you out of your degrading condition that they put you in the first place. That is stupidity. Whoever hungers, let them be satisfied in the house of their ancestors. Let them find there a wall which protects them. Now, where are you going to find that wall of protection? In the bosoms of the Arabs and the Europeans? Hell no. In the bosom of your ancestors. Those who honor their ancestors are those who will be fulfilled. We will not be fulfilled in any way, shape, or form if we continue to drink from the fountains of these people that have no respect or regard for who we are. Our ancestors taught us about the power of symbols. They knew the power of symbology. The power of symbology to penetrate the mind, that the mind only intakes mainly visual images. The mind learns through visual imagery. The mind learns visually, not textually. Our ancestors pioneered symbols to be encrypted in our DNA, in our bloodline. that we may not forget what we are, who we are, and where we're going. Our ancestors taught that symbols are the graphic expressions of a spiritual and cultural system, that symbols are the most powerful teaching tools. And I must say dua to one of our great ancestors, Baba Runoko Rashid, an African historian and symbologist who circumnavigated the earth to uncover and teach us about our African symbols, and who taught that symbols are the signpost to a people's destiny. So important to understand that symbols are a unifier. They bring people together. That symbols are identifiers of a particular group. When we embrace our symbols, we are speaking the same language. We are perpetuating the same mindset. Then nobody can penetrate us. Symbols are the most powerful educational tool. They are a cultural tool. They are instructive. They shape our human behavior and character. We think in a particular way because of the roads built for us by our ancestors, which is expressed in the symbols that they inscribed all over, literally proliferated all over the African continent. That symbols are the most effective way of educating a people. Our ancestors were symbologists, and they proliferated their environment with symbols that we may remember. They knew the value and timelessness of symbols to remind their progenies of their culture and their history. And what a job we are doing today, right? In terms of misunderstanding our cultural symbols, our spiritual symbols, running away from our symbols. The Ankh is not just any symbol. It is a symbol that generates energy to transform your consciousness, to bring you back to your reality. That is what spirituality is. It is appreciating your reality, connecting back to the universe as one. And the truth is that most of us do not seek or want liberation, as a matter of fact. Our samambanam, in other words, our highest thought, our highest goal is to be accepted or to be validated by our slave masters, Europeans and Arabs. The Ankh symbolizes all universal laws and principles, union of feminine and masculine energy. The feminine principle, which is personified as Nun, i.e. water, that is our essence. 75% of 80% of what you are is water. Same with the universe. 80% of it, nearly 80% is water. The feminine principle of Nun, which is water, and her complement, Ta, Ptah, if you wish, the creator, which brings about balance. That is what balance is. That is what perfection is. Perfection is balance. Feminine, masculine energy. Feminine principle, Nut, complemented by whom? Geb. Feminine principle, Aset, which the Greeks call Isis. In the Yoruba cosmology known as Yemonja, complemented by Asa, which the Greeks call Osiris, and in the Yoruba cosmology again, Obatala. The Ankh personifies balance, the order of the universe, feminine, masculine energy complementing each other in union to continue the eternal cycle of life. Of course, we are the most disconnected. As a matter of fact, if you look at the African gender relationship today, we are at war with our women. Women are at war with men, men at war with women, and that expresses our disunity, the fact that we are the most disorganized and disorderly people in the world. Our ancestors expressed their understanding of the interplay of the divine forces or energies in anthropomorphism, meaning human personification for teaching purposes. You get better understanding when certain forces are personified as masculine and feminine energy. That was a tool to teach the masses. Europeans never understood this, right? They saw this as polytheistic in the sense that worshiping multiple gods. No, there is no African culture that is polytheistic, none whatsoever. We understand the Most High as one universal force. That's it. And we are the expressions of that, human expressions of that. And ultimately, every aspect of our existence is valued, is an expression of what the Most High is. The Ankh represents our gender history, our gender relationship. There is no such thing as patriarchy or matriarchy. That's post-colonial bastardized rubbishness. It was balance. African cosmology is about balance. Female and male side by side. This was our cosmology. pre-colonial cosmology. Our gender structure and relationship in pre-colonial Africa was purely based on balance. The Ankh reminds us of our historical, our cultural, and our social obligations. It expresses our social roles and responsibility. It represents our destiny. We are seeking balance, right? The Ankh is an uncompromising, unapologetic, unequivocal statement that declares, I am an African. I know myself. I am free. I am an African in spirit, mind, and body. I am animated by an African spirit. I belong to my ancestors. I am connected to my ancestors, and we have a symbiotic relationship, mutual relationship. My operating hardware and software is African. My psychology is African. My frame of reference is African. I am free from the neo-colonial and imperialist matrix. I have exercised my Western and Middle Eastern spirit. I know my history, and I know their history. I own my mind. I reject Western and Middle Eastern religions, their philosophies, and their ideologies. I am neither a Christian nor a Muslim, nor a Jew, God forbid. I am an African hook, line, and sinker. That is what the Ankh states. Now you can see why most Africans, in fact, nearly all Africans, will run away from the Ankh like death. They will rather wrap their necks round in their death symbol called the Christian cross or the Islamist half crescent moon, okay, which is a signpost to their culture, nothing to do with you. And I shall insert another caveat before going any further. I exhort you all to exercise intellectual vigilance, please. Of course, today's message is stacked, it is loaded. Okay, it will penetrate the lies and misinformation that are ossified in our psyche. And I recognize that most of us cannot handle the truth, but that does not abdicate my responsibility as a teacher to explain and proclaim the truth. And I am saying that if you hear something today that is outside of your circumference of awareness, please exercise intellectual vigilance. And instead of shutting your own mind down, please make notes. And I adjure you to go and do your own research to verify what I've said, whether it's the truth or not. Ashe, as a teacher, my main role is to present you with information that you don't know, things that you are ignorant of, to stimulate your thought process, to plant good seeds in your mind, not to regurgitate what you already know. Ashe, the Ankh represent our light switch being turned on. Your light is your ancestors. Okay, Arabs and Europeans are not your light. They represent darkness. Just study history. That's very clear. The Ankh symbolizes the interplay between the spiritual realm and the material realm. Right? So it is not just a biological representation of what we are. It is a cosmological representation of what is. The Ankh represents honor to our ancestors. First, the feminine principle. The masculine principle and the fruit of that union, okay, the offsprings. The Ankh represents the 32nd and the 36th law of Ma'at. Ma'at, basically, which is, again, another universal principle that begins, it's a feminine principle that begins with truth, that expresses truth, justice, righteousness, balance, order, harmony, and reciprocity. The 32nd law of Ma'at says, I will not commit treason against my sacred ancestors. The 36th law of Ma'at says, I will not blaspheme against the Most High. The Ankh represents the power of the womb, which is a microcosm of the universe. And the phallus, you can call that the shaft or the penis, okay, which is the male fertility aspect, okay, which is the spark of life. The Ankh is not an Egyptian cross. Get that in your head. It is not an Egyptian Christian cross. It predates Egypt by over 10,000 years. The Ankh was not conceived in Egypt. The Ankh it was found all over Africa, throughout the Happy Valley, which you call Nile Valley civilizations. The Ankh has been an African symbology for over 20,000 years. So the origin of the Ankh is not Kemet, that which you call Kemet, which is Egypt, translated in the Medunetta, okay? And by the way, the word Kemet, which is again our ancient African language, does not translate to what the African people back in Egypt as such called themselves. They did not call themselves black people or people of the black land. They did not call themselves that. Just keep that in mind. Much more about that much later. There are many other civilizations in Africa that predate Kemet, and our Kemetu, i.e. the African people, made reference to that in the writings. If you read the pyramid text, they call it the pyramid text. We didn't. We call it the Merkut Sabayet. Okay? Or the coffin text, which is the Karast Sabayet. Okay? These are the oldest spiritual books in the world, by far. Right? Or the Pertem Heru, which is the book of coming forth by day. And all these books that I've just quoted to you, they predate all your religions, that your mainstream religions, by over thousands of years, over 4,000 or 5,000 years. Right? Okay, so we find all these writings in these books, and all the temple and tomb inscriptions in Kemet. Okay, even in certain parts of South Africa, in Central Africa. Okay, you will find these inscriptions, the Ankh. And we must remember that Kemet is the grandchild of Kush. Okay, there were advanced civilizations around Kush well before Kemet actually sprung up. Okay, so Kemet is pretty much a culmination of all of the other African civilizations throughout the Happy Valley or the Nile Valley, right? And that is from the highlands on the east coast of Central Africa to the Delta regions in the extreme north. Am I making sense? Right? The Ankh was found on a volcanic rock in the southern parts of Africa over 10,000 years before Kemet. The Ankh was prominent throughout the Happy Valley civilizations. Right? From the Blue Nile, which begins at Lake Tana, that is the mountainous regions of northern Ethiopia, to the White Nile, which is Nyanza, which the invaders call Lake Victoria. This is the foothills of Mount Kilimanjaro, okay, which in our book, in our sacred text, we refer to as the Mountain of the Moon, and this you find between Kenya and Tanzania. So the Ankh is African power. It is a spiritual and physical armor. It threatens, it terrorizes, it disquietens our enemies. So it should be. It is our lighthouse. It clears and opens the way for us. Right? The Ankh is the spirit and essence of Africa. It symbolizes that we are sustained, we are satisfied, we are content, we are gratified, we are liberated by the provisions made by ancestors. And to look outside of our ancestral homes for sustenance or anything else is to perish. It is the duty of parents to make provisions for their progenies that they may not be seduced by the deceptive provisions of aliens or their enemies. And the invaluable provisions made by ancestors should satisfy all of our cravings, regardless of alien baits and deceptions. And we are being deceived. That's why we go looking outside of our protective wall. The Ankh is a reminder of our responsibilities and obligations to the Most High and the sacred ancestors, in the sense that you are responsible to care for, to manage the legacies that have been left for you. The Ankh expresses the universal laws and principles, the interplay between energy and matter. And listen, matter is just the densification of energy. That's it. We knew for thousands of years that energy is interchangeable with matter. Okay? That we are physical expressions of our spiritual essence. We are spiritual beings. Right? We are not our bodies. The body is just a manifestation of our spirit. That's it. The Ankh is our body of knowledge in iconograph. It represents our cosmology, our historiology, our ecology, our epistemology. In other words, bringing us to the knowledge of truth. Our ontology, our beingness, what we are. The Ankh is our foundation of knowledge packaged in a symbol. It is a preeminent sign of the African spiritual high culture that firstly honors whom? The feminine principle, feminine energy, the mother, the womb, which is the human incubator, the chamber of life. Then it honors the masculine principle. It respects humanity, it respects life. Masculine energy, the phallus, the spark, the igniter of life, the penis, the father, the male fertility. And then he goes on to honor the synthesis of the female and male union, which is the offspring, the fruit. The Ankh symbolizes the union between the water and the earth to bring about vegetation. The Ankh symbolizes the interplay between the spiritual realm and the physical realm to express the eternal cycle of life. It symbolizes the interplay between the spirit and the mind and the matter. You are a spiritual being having a human experience. The Ankh expresses the continuous regeneration of life force. It is the highest expression of gratitude to the Most High and the ancestors. You are not wearing the Ankh because you are ungrateful. You are an ingrate. Your slave masters have taught you to value their own system and reject yours. Right? And if you go back and think on the old saying, one picture is worth 1,000 words, well, in the case of the Ankh, is worth millions of words. Right? The Ankh is not only a cosmological expression of how the universe functions, it is a spiritual, it is a cultural, historical, ontological, epistemological, axiological. It is a physical symbol. The Ankh is Ma'at. It represents truth. Okay, not fantasies. It is reality. It is scientific. Right? Life cannot come into being without the union of feminine and masculine energy. It is impossible. It is African power expressed in iconograph. The top of the icon, which is the loop, which represents what? The womb. And the bottom of the icon, the bottom of the symbol, which is the vertical line, which represents the phallus. And then you got the lateral bars on each side, which represents the offspring. You see it? Masculine and feminine and masculine, and bringing about the offspring. So the Ankh demystifies, it refutes, it rejects historical, cosmological, spiritual, biological, and scientific falsifications. You see it? Right? Humanity did not come into existence through the ribcage of Adam. That is just nonsense. Okay? It's the feminine and masculine energy coming together. Right? So get over these religious books. Okay? They're fantasy. They're not reality. They're not historical books. They do not represent science. Right? Your African spiritual system is African sacred science. Right? The Ankh is the most powerful statement in iconograph. And I am saying that we will continue to perish if we persist in our dedicated ignorance of our African legacies. The Ankh is the highest expression of our African identity. So please permit me to enlighten us on the relevance, on the value, on the significance of one of our most valuable, most powerful legacies, the Blessed Ankh. Thousands and thousands of years of African body of knowledge expressed in iconograph. Certainly one of the oldest symbols on planet Earth, and certainly by far one of the most valuable gifts bequeathed to us by ancestors. And to reject this blessed Ankh is to perish. And listen, a people who are ignorant, or people who reject or disown their cultural symbols, their spiritual symbols, their iconographs, are a slave people. The reason we are slaves is because we reject our value system. A rootless people, as Baba Marcus Mosiah Garvey puts it, a tree without roots is what? A dead tree. Simple as. A dead people who are divorced from their ancestral power grid. Your ancestors are your power grid. Okay? They taught us that images are far superior to text, that our brain processes images 60,000 times faster than text. Our brain prefer images to text, and that 90% of the information transmitted to the brain is visual. Our brain reacts and responds to images more so than text. Hence why the process of colonization begins with and ends with images. Images are the most powerful form of communicating. Don't miss that. And about a week ago, of course, I was honored and privileged to spend a few days in one of the most incredible places on planet Earth, Dogon Land. This is in rural Mali. Oh, beloved, it was an awe-inspiring, mind-blowing experience. A highly productive and fulfilling trip. I was blown away by their knowledge, and this, I think, was the third time going to Mali, second time going to Dogon Land. Every time I go there, I'm blown away. I'm blown away by their knowledge and their relationship with the cosmos, with the earth, with the universe. Their oneness with the universe. They are the expression of literally humans expressed as the universe. And I'm so thankful for the opportunity to continue to replant my roots back on the cliffs and valleys of Bandiagara, Dogon land. Listen, our holy place, our holy land is Africa. You have no business spending your money, okay, money that you don't have in the first place in Jerusalem or Saudi Arabia. Get off that foolishness, right? Africa is the holy land. It is the birthplace of humanity. It's the birthplace of civilization. That is the holy land for Africans. I don't care where Arabs and Europeans go. I really don't care. I care where we go. So let us stop wasting time, money, and energy deifying our slave master's domain. And that part which you call Saudi Arabia, okay, that was Africa. If you know history, you'll know that, okay? Northeast Africa that they stole from us, okay? And renamed or reclaimed as the Middle East and whatnot. There was no such place in history called Middle East or Saudi. If only we knew how powerful we are as a people. When you study the ancientness of our genius, you know why it was and is necessary for us to be kept ignorant by the European and the Arabian power structures. Sadly, we have been bamboozled with materialism, with capitalism, so-called modernity, and its hollow symbols of success. Bamboozled mesmerized by glitz, grandeur, and worse, we have allowed religion to defile and corrupt us. The Dogons are renowned for zealously preserving their spiritual system, their cultural system from the tentacles of Islam. And these are one of the very few African groups that rejected and resisted Islam, or any other religion for that matter. They knew that they will become powerless if they allowed Islam to penetrate their spiritual system. And I have made it my mission to travel the length and breadth of Africa to search out for those of our people who rejected and resisted the poison of religion. To date, I have covered literally most African countries just to corroborate, to find out what I am and who I am so we can come off this sickness that we have in our brains. The Dogons are renowned for fiercely protecting and preserving their ancient spiritual system. They are. So you see, it is necessary, if you can afford it, to travel. To travel and study pre-colonial Africa, not the post-colonial bastardized Africa. The Dogons rejected, they resisted the poison of religion. Right? And I came across such people again, my people, which are the Fulbes. I remember a few years ago traveling around Sudan and Ethiopia, I came across the Fulbes. These are the ones you call Fulas or Fulani now. And by the way, the word Fula or Fulani is a European and Arabic corruptions of their original name. Okay, we did not call ourselves paternally. I'm a Fula. I'm a Fulbe, not Fula. We never called ourselves Fullers. Absolutely not. Fula is a Spanish word used to describe something ugly or unattractive. So get that in your head. And Fulani or Fulan is a reductive Arabic word given to a people whose name is unknown. And this is why it's so important. I keep saying to people, we need to study ourselves. You cannot liberate yourself and use the names that these people, your slave masters, used to define you and continue to use that name when they are pejoratives. Yes, paternally, I am of a Fulbe stock. And like I mentioned earlier, a few years ago, I traced an undefiled and uncorrupted Fulbe group in northern Sudan and southern Ethiopia. Small, powerful groups that rejected Islam and Christianity. And they were punished as a result by being relegated to the fringes of their respective societies. Relegated to the periphery of their rural zones. And of course, this was where I claimed one of my African names, Cherno, not the corrupted Arabic version, okay? The Fulbe Cherno means light, okay? Not a student as such, in terms of the Arabic translation, or someone that is studied, okay? That's not what the original Fulbe meaning of Cherno is. Cherno just means light, okay? Not a scholar as such, right? Interestingly, I'm talking about my experience here in Dogon land. There's always tension between the Dogons and the Fulbes, to the point that the Fulbes refers to the Dogons as Habi, Habi meaning stranger or pagan. And this is because the Dogons rejected Islam. And of course, the Fulbes, listen, let me just confess this. I am a Fulbe. The Fulbes were the Africans that the Islamic Arabs transformed or recreated into Fullahs to spread Islam throughout West Africa, to the point that the Fullah today is completely ignorant of their thousands of years of history before Islam, and even to the point of being ignorant of the Fulbe cosmology, which has a Kushite origin. Most Fullahs do not know that. Fullahs were mainly responsible for Islamizing West Africa, to the point that Fullahs today actually identify themselves more so as Arabs. Okay, if you want to know Arabian puppets, the Fullahs are the Arabian puppets, much like Ethiopians and Sudanese. I was in Ethiopia, I beg your pardon, not only the Ethiopian and Sudanese, even the Somalians. They disidentify themselves as, in fact, as a matter of fact, they will get really irate if you call them Africans. No other African group were despiritualized and de-revolutionized and emptied of their memory like the Fullahs. The Arabs, they did a good job on the Fullahs. I'm telling you, study history. And the irony is that the Fulbes are actually one of the oldest people on planet Earth. A Kushite group that have totally lost their history and value. And get off those silly books that these Europeans and their agents write. Okay, go and do some research. Travel and go and speak to these people and see what they're telling you. Sad commentary. Right? I didn't accept the nonsense written by Europeans, okay? And I was provoked in that sense to go and do some research in terms of my history. And this was one of the things that led me to reading history and studying anthropology, to study African people and their migration and study how the Fulbes were actually recreated in the image of Arabs and used as a tool, as a political tool, as a weapon to Arabize West Africa. The most powerful Africans are non-religious Africans. Let me say that again. The most powerful Africans are non-religious Africans. Those we look down upon as backward, they're the most powerful people. The Dogons are world-renowned sculptors. The Dogons are legendary for their special knowledge of the constellation, the stars. In fact, many believe that the Dogons are aliens because of their knowledge of the star system and their 60-yearly Kanaga mask celebration of the Sirius B, which they call Kiziuzi, which means the littlest stars. The little star Sirius B orbiting Sirius A, which is the big star, and that happens every 50 years. And they celebrate these phenomena every 60 years, just like the Kushites did. And listen, the Dogons speak of their Kushite ancestry. Okay, so they're up from the north. They migrated to Mali in the 1500s. Okay. So keep that in mind. These people are renowned for their mind-blowing knowledge on cosmology, on astrology, on astronomy, on ecology. And listen, for me, it was truly an honor and privilege to sit at the feet of the Hogon, this is the village elder, and other elders to tap and quench my thirst with their wisdom. They saw for thousands of years what Europeans with all their high-tech gadgets and satellites could only see in 1971. That's what you call Sirius A, B, and C. Okay? They had documented that for thousands of years. If only we knew our greatness, we will not be in the condition we're in. Dogons are a statement of our modernity, including religion, despiritualizes, de-revolutionizes Africans and disconnects Africans from their nature. The depth of the Dogon's knowledge of cosmology and ecology is unparalleled. Two French anthropologists, Dietelin and Griot, they traveled to Dogon land, of course, to steal and appropriate Dogon astronomy and their cosmology, which they chronicled in I think it's a 1,000-page book. I read this book years ago. It's called The Pale Fox. These two Frenchmen, whose motive was to discredit Dogon knowledge, they ended up being blown away by the supreme cosmic knowledge of the Dogons. So for me, it was truly an honor to quench my thirst for truth from the immeasurable wisdom of my people and reorientate myself with our invaluable spirituality and traditions. Ashe. The Ankh is a reminder that the ancestors dwell within us, that it took over 1 million ancestors over a period of generations existed to bring us into existence, to experience the material world. Keep that in mind. For you to be here, it took over 20 generations and over 1 million ancestors, and you think you're alone. You walk with your ancestors. You are your ancestors. And in our dedicated ignorance, you have the audacity to call on the names and gods of your enslavers, to seek refuge in the dungeon of your enslavers. When did you ever hear a European or an Arab call on the name of an African ancestor, let alone an African deity? And if you don't know it, the Ankh represents the genius of our ancestors. I'll say it again, the genius of our ancestors. We cannot know our greatness and be in the condition that we're in. The Ankh reminds us of who we are, what we are, that we may go back and retrieve our greatness. Ashe? The Ankh represents African cosmology, that we are the cosmos, having a human experience. It represents our planetary journey. It reminds us that we are the light, but we must turn on our light switch. Ashe? Turning on the light of our minds is like turning on the cosmic encyclopedia known as the Akashic Records, which tells us that we are born with everything that ever existed, that exists and will ever exist, and all we have to do is to go on a search for it. That nobody will turn on our light switch but ourselves. The Ankh reminds us of the need to go and search for that light switch. You need your ancestors to walk through that journey, and it is sacrilegious for you to be walking around with your damn slave masters, the Arabs and the Europeans, to find your light. You'll never find your light. The Ankh reminds us of the value of our ancestors and the need to study our ancestors. Right? I spend a whole lot of money traveling literally all over the continent of Africa to find the truth and to bring light to the geniusness of my ancestors. The Ankh represents the interplay of the seen and the unseen, and that we must remember that there is an unseen cosmos. Europeans and the Arabs, they've only conquered the material reality. That's it. The unseen reality takes takes preeminence, right? The things that you don't see. The Ankh reminds us of our greatness and charges us to do something with our greatness. And ultimately, it is the key to fulfilling our greatness through our ancestral knowledge. And it is either we embrace our identity or accept perishing as our destiny. And we will continue to perish if we continue to reject our spirituality, our culture, our heritage, our values, our iconographs, and most importantly, our ancestors. You see, in order to produce self-hatred and self-negation in Africans, the West and the Middle East, they went about degrading, devaluing, demonizing, and bastardizing all things Africans. All things. In ancient Africa, the Ankh was the most prominent and precious symbol throughout Africa, until after persistent European and Arabian invasions of our lands and our minds, and once our minds were conquered, we became our own greatest enemies. We became the highest expressions of self-hate and self-negation. No other people in the world disidentify themselves with who they are and what they are. No other people. No other people in the world run away from themselves like death. Right? The fact that the Ankh, which is the foremost African symbol, the fact that this symbol is as rare as hen's teeth in most African nations today and in African circles is evidence of the level of our self-hate, our historical ignorance, our cultural dislocation. And I maintain that there are not many true Africans in the world today. What we see bing-banging on the surface of the cosmos with highly melanated phenotypes are actually Europeans and Arabs masquerading in African edifice. You cannot possess a European psychology or an Arabian psychology or their spirit and call yourself an African. No way. We have to deal with our ancestors. The unsatisfied heart, and you cannot be satisfied outside of the walls of your ancestors. The unsatisfied heart is the highest expression of spiritual poverty. Those who glut outside of the dwellings of their ancestors are those who perish. Those who quench the thirst from the fountains of their enslavers are the greatest enemies of their people. Only insane people will eat from their enemies. No other people in the world characterize insanity than us, who have been created in the image of Europeans and Arabs under the guises of their respective religions, Christianity, Judaism, and Islam. And we will continue to perish, to be inconsequential, to be beggars, to be flunkies, so long as we keep drinking from the fountain of these people. That our ignorance is death. Ignorance is death, and ingratitude is the essence of vileness. No other symbol in the world honors and exalts the human family like the Ankh. No other symbol in the world honors and exalts women. Only the Ankh does. And it was Baba Momowale Malcolm X that said, every envy blinds people and makes it impossible for them to think or see clearly. Here we are today, millions of African women and men chasing and lusting after Judaism, Christianity, and Islam that reduces our humanity to servitude, to slaves, to permanent underclass, to lackeys. To identify with our slave master's religion is to subjugate and reduce our humanity, to validate the devalued and servitude status to the Arabs and Europeans, to be de-Africanized, to trample upon the blood and sacrifice of our sacred ancestors. And I'm telling you this morning that the Ankh is the highest expression of the Most High, the highest expression of family, and family is unity, female and male, and offspring. Ashe. And my assignment is not to thrill you or serenade you or to make you shiver and shake or titivate your palate with motivational platitudes. No. My assignment is to wake up my people who are in deep sleep in a house that is on fire. I teach. My role is not to impress anyone with fancy words. I am not a logophile or a motivational speaker. I do not massage or inflate putrefying egos or emotionally indulge anyone. If you don't like what I say, don't listen. You can leave. That is your prerogative. You have a right to remain ignorant, and I have a right to allow you to remain ignorant. My role is to kickstart the process of reversing or undoing ideas and concepts that have been programmed into the minds of my people by the religious hegemony, Christianity, Judaism, and Islam, and their statements and doctrines which result in us adopting the belief system that instigates a loss of contact with reality, with facts, with history and spirituality. We are a people that have been so brain-stained with lies that we have developed a chronic allergy to truth. And for most of us, even the truth cannot dislodge the lies. I am boldly, unashamedly, unapologetically, and uncompromisingly anti-Western. I'm anti-Middle Eastern, and I'm anti-religion in retaliation to the West and the Middle East. And not only that, their religions, the philosophies, and everything about them being anti-African. I don't dance with my enemies. No, I don't. I used to be there. And by the way, I am qualified to critique their religions. I'm qualified to critique their worldviews. I am sufficiently credentialed. I am bedecked with their emblems. For once upon a time, I was one of their agents doing their work on my people. But for the grace of the Most High and the ancestors who never gave up on me. And once I collided head-on with truth, the light bulbs switched on. And once the lights turns on, you cannot turn it off. I was able to see the damage we were causing amongst ourselves as a people because of their poisonous programming. Through years of dedicated study and travels, I was armed with sufficient factual evidence to reject their religions, their philosophies, their ideologies that they employ to destroy my land and my people. I no longer think like a child. I no longer reason like a child, nor talk like a child. Western and Middle Eastern religions are children. And sadly, for most of us, that is our default destiny from the cradle of our mother's womb to the grave. When I became a man, I long ago put away childish things. I have assumed my proper status. As one who bears the genes of the parents of humanity, I have assumed my correct position. I no longer embrace the dictates of planetary freshmen, Johnny-come-latelys. I speak unapologetically, and I speak as my ancestors animate me to speak. And I know that does not sit well with many of my brothers and sisters because of the extent of European and Arabian softwares uploaded in their minds. And if you are having an intimate affair with ignorance, we've all been there, this message will possibly offend you or cause you discomfort. I know it will. And I assure you that this is usual. When truth confronts 100 years of lies, that dislodging of lies in our brains becomes a traumatic and painful process. I recognize this, but I'm not apologizing. That truth is necessary surgery, and surgery is necessary pain. And sadly, we cannot have any worthy human discourse without addressing the religious blood that coursed through our veins. That is the extent of our religious programming. We are transfused with religious blood. That has become our lifeblood. And my intention in this message is not to downplay or bash or attack or invalidate the Abrahamic religions who stole from our legacy to repackage and sell back to us in their own respective images. Listen, Abraham did not exist. Just get over that. Okay, that is all fiction. Okay, I am a historian. I've been through that. There was a time I preached Abraham because I was ignorant. I didn't know. And when I knew the truth, I know there was never any Abraham, there's never any Moses. So I'm not going to get into any intellectual gymnastics, okay, to even discuss that. Okay, they're not historical figures. Get over it. Okay, I want to tell you about the European and Arabian thugs who attacked, who bastardized, who demonized our sacred sciences. Right? And of course, being that Abrahamic religions have become an intrinsic part of our soul, and that religion has become our bloodline, and that religion was the culprit of one of the world's greatest Holocaust in Africa by the Arabs and the Europeans. Religion has to be exposed in every African conversation, for it is our greatest enemy to this day. Just get in your mind, that's it. The greatest threat to Africa is religion. We cannot have any useful discourse without addressing Africa's greatest enemy and threat, Abrahamic religions, fictional religions. My role as a teacher is to present you with the truth that you may recognize how these nefarious religions, and ultimately that is the characterization of religion. They divide, they conquer, they destroy. They're tools, they're political tools. They disempower, they disorientate, they're manipulating tools. They disunite us as a people. So it is either we embraced our legacies or perish as slaves of European and Arabs. You see, the ankh that I wear around my neck and my bracelet and my clothes and my clothing, it attracts a lot of evil eye. Fear, indignation, it terrorizes a lot of Africans. And I see all kinds of negative expressions due to their ignorance. Nothing unsettles the religious brain-stained brother and sister more than the sight of an ankh symbol around my neck or around my body. Listen, the African who derides, who rejects, who ridicules, who denounces, who dismisses or denigrates the ankh is the highest expression of self-hate. We have been conditioned to ignorantly associate the ankh with Satanism, with devilishness, with demonism, with occultism. It's nonsense. The European and Arabian invaders, they could not deal with the feminine principle of the ankh. They could not deal with truth. Why? Because their respective history, their cosmology, their cultures are cavemen, patriarchal, misogynistic cultures, where women are devalued to a lower status, where women are beneath men, where women are servants to men. All Abrahamic religions relegate women to a lower status. Get over it. There's no exceptions. Religion is not only anti-African, it is anti-women. No women angels, no women deific principles. Women have a lower intellect and intrinsically evil. Women are not allowed to teach or speak publicly in the presence of men. Women were the vessels used by a so-called Satan to engender evil into the world. Religion is nothing other than the deification of a people's culture, says one of my greatest teachers, Baba Yosef Ben Yochanan. The gender cosmology of Europeans and Arabs is patriarchal. Therefore, their religion expresses the same shit. Patriarchal imbalanced structure. That has nothing to do with Africans. What we see today flaunting as African religions are an amalgamated, syncretized, bastardized post-colonial belief system. Africans were never religious people. Religion meaning formalized dogma that reduces humans to slave relationship with God, with their God, that validates spiritual racism and all forms of racism, that makes people irresponsible. We were spiritual people who learned from the universe, who sought to be in harmony, in balance with the universe, who were responsible and accountable people, who were divine people, who were connected to nature and overstood their position as divine aspect of the Most High, having a human experience. So the ankh activates our power. The ankh is African story in a picture frame. The ankh is a time capsule representing the present, the past, and the future in one frame. It is a connector to our power grid. It is honorific to our ancestors. It threatens our enemies. It honors the feminine and masculine principle. And ultimately, it honors those on whose shoulder we stand upon. Ashe, the ankh respects and honors life. It reverences the spiritual experience and the human experience. Ashe, and to be ignorant of our power is to become somebody else's slave. They remove the slave chains from our hands and feet and place them on our minds using their kindergarten twisted religions, Judaism, Christianity, and Islam, as the padlock, and we foolishly delude ourselves that we are free. And one of the reasons Africans reject the ankh is not only dedicated ignorance engineered by the colonization process of Europeans and Arabs, is because we have become them. The Europeans and the Arabs, they reject the Ankh. Therefore, because they manufactured you, they constructed you, you perpetuate their same, their same psychology. Right? The Ankh is not just a fashion iconograph or a trending piece of jewelry. The Ankh is a statement. And the fact that the Ankh is eerily inconspicuous amongst Africans tells you of our current state of historical ignorance, cultural ignorance, that the brain-stained religious African is more likely to wear the Christian cross, which signifies death, the most unnatural aspect of humanity, or the Islamic half-crescent, which is an indicator of the Islamic tenets. Do you see it? We cannot accept the worldview of our enemies, and which is why I maintain that Africans today are as rare as hen's teeth. What we see today clothed in African hardware are either Afro-Europeans or Afro-Arabs. Africans with European or Arabian software or spirit or psychology. We are not Africans because of our genes or our bloodline or our geographical locus. No. Religion can easily overcome that. We see that. What makes us Africans is the African spirit that animates us. And there are not many Africans today animated by an African spirit. No. What we see today in the world is African hardware. Highly melanated schizoids, bing-banging on the surface of the cosmos. African phenotypes or shells with European or Arabian software or spirit or psychology. Let me repeat.